Please welcome the President and Chief Executive of Hearst Magazines International from the USA, Duncan Edwards.
Afternoon, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow publishers, colleagues and partners of Hearst, which I think is about half the room. It's good to see you all here. So, a horse walks into a bar. The barman looks up and says, "Hey, why the long face?" Now, I apologize if English isn't your first language, but you'll have to get someone near you to explain the joke. In fact, I apologize if English is your first language, because truly, that is a truly awful joke. But the truth is that as I've been traveling around the world over the last couple of years, I've noticed that an awful lot of people in our industry seem to have very long faces. And what I want to use the next 20 minutes or so to do is to just explain why, certainly at Hearst, we think that's misguided. And that, in fact, this is one of the most exciting times ever in the history of consumer media, and it's a time to be very optimistic. I work at Hearst, and over the last 126 years of our company, we've been involved in every major form of media, from our origins in newspapers, through the birth of radio and television, through movies, through books, through cable TV, and in the last 15 years, in many forms of digital media. We're a full-service media company. We're creating and distributing and monetizing content for many markets and in many formats. We've got 5 main companies within the group of Hearst, and one of them, Hearst Magazines, for which I work, is one of the world's largest magazine publishers. And at Hearst, we've always used diversification to manage risk. We've striven to have a balance in our revenues and earnings between digital and analog revenues, between consumer revenue and advertiser revenue, between B2C and B2B, and latterly between domestic, by which I mean the US, and international. But the truth is that all of these businesses are being disrupted in one way or another. Even the great cable TV businesses, in which we have a role, and which underpin the revenues and earnings of most of the largest media companies in the US, are seeing a slowdown in their growth or a contraction in their users as streaming services from Netflix, from Hulu or Amazon or any local competitors in your markets are encouraging consumers to disaggregate and only pay for what they want. The story of Hearst strategy, though, is for another day, another conference. What I want to talk about is what we're doing at Hearst Magazines in response to what are real challenges, and why, in fact, in our view, there are many reasons for optimism at what's an incredibly exciting time in the evolution of our media. Now, I should explain this guy on the screen. To be honest, he's got absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with my presentation, and nor do the words that come out of his mouth have anything to do with either. However, his name's Ian Drury, and you should look him up on your favorite music magazine website to get his history. He wrote a wonderful song called Reasons to be Cheerful, Part 3. And I know that at this time in the day, it is possible for your attention to drift a little bit. And so if you find what Ian says as he pops up from time to time during this presentation more interesting than what I have to say, I will understand. But as we look at a world in which consumer habits are changing, and inevitably advertiser habits will change along with consumer habits, we're looking at our business through 4 main lenses, and I'm going to take you through those. First and foremost, we encourage all of our managers to look after what we've got. We're blessed to have very successful businesses, and the temptation to focus only on the new whilst ignoring the publishing skills of creating quality magazines has to be resisted. Actually, I looked at this slide last night, and I realized that it might come across as a bit of an overclaim. So I did make a last-minute change. Oh, no, it didn't show. Did that go back? There you go. Most of the world's greatest media brands. And yes, at Hearst, we are lucky enough to own or publish some of the world's most well-known and well-loved brands. And as we go forward in the future, it is these brands that will receive the majority of our investment funds and our attention. And we've built our business on the principle of partnership. And many of you are here, and we believe strongly in those principles of good partnership which lead to long-term mutual benefits. And the combination of these great brands and these great partners has helped us to build a global business. And as Urbano said, underpinning it all is the quality of the magazines themselves. When I talk to our managers, I talk to them about measuring that quality both relatively against the competition and absolutely against the expectations of the consumer. And unless we're number one and we're fulfilling consumer expectations, then the job is not done. So we're constantly looking at ways to improve the quality of our products. There's many examples I could give you. I'll just choose one. And this relates to Karine Rottfeld, who was the iconic editor-in-chief of Vogue Paris. And when she left, I pursued her around Europe to persuade her to become the global fashion director for Harper's Bazaar. She now produces 4 stories a year, which are published simultaneously in every issue of our nearly 30 editions of Harper's Bazaar around the world, and massively upgrading the quality of the products that we have. So here's Ian again. And we know from research all over the world that consumers love magazine brands, and they love the magazines themselves. When done well, as Urbano has very well demonstrated, these can be fantastic businesses with very good margins. And we certainly are confident that they'll continue to be so long into the future. The second lens through which we look at our business is frankly much less fun, but it's no less important than producing those great editorial products. The impact on revenues of consumer changes and, clearly the turmoil in the global economy, particularly in a market like Italy, which has had more than its fair share of difficulties, means that we're constantly searching for more efficient ways to do business. On a local, regional, and global basis, we're looking for and achieving cost reduction through consolidation where we can. We're experimenting and implementing new content creation models and new ways of selling advertising. And I'm sorry to all the suppliers, but we're also looking at global procurement projects to drive down supplier prices. And as an international cross-border publisher with a finite amount of capital, we have to think carefully about where we want to be an owner, where we want to be an equity investor, and where we're happy to be a licensor. Now, the good news for all of us is that magazine publishers are learning how to do this. The reality of cost reduction, of controlling costs, managing costs down, is a never-ending job. It's a requirement. It's part of the table stakes for being in our business. I accept that it's not the reason why most of us got into the business, but it's something we have to do. Yep, this is quite an obvious slide. I apologize for that. But we are the publishers of Cosmo. Now, all of us have multiple assets in our organizations. And in all truth, although we've talked about it a lot at conferences like this, in general, we're not doing a great deal with those assets beyond the print and digital products. At Hearst, we consider we've got great brands, we've got an ability to create content at scale, we've got these global relationships with advertisers, and we have an international network. And so, we're continuing to launch magazines. Since the last time this Congress met in Delhi, we've launched many major new international editions of our key brands. But we've also launched an entirely new title, HGTV, in partnership with Scripps in the United States. And it and the predecessor, Food Network magazine, have both become big contributors, highly profitable, and the #1 selling magazines in their respective categories of food and shelter. And just this month, we've launched new editions of Harper's Bazaar in Germany with our colleagues at Burda. We've launched Harper's Bazaar in Japan in our own company, Hearst Fujingaho, and ELLE in our very convoluted partnership with Bauer and Lagardère in Australia, and others. And the great news is that all of these magazines, all of these new editions have come in well above expectations and are off to a flying start. We've used our brand equity, our editorial talent, and our international network to launch an entirely new magazine, Bazaar Art, which was conceived in Indonesia and has now been rolled out into 7 markets and is now the largest circulating magazine for the contemporary art world, which is just on fire as a market, as you know. We've created a global ad sales capability through Hearst Advertising Worldwide, and we're building a global digital advertising platform with many partners with the launch this year of Totally Global Media. And in addition to all of the new media products, we've struck a licensing deal with IMG, the global brand licensing firm, to develop licensing programs, product licensing programs for our biggest brands. So look, most companies have some experience of developing new products, but I feel genuinely that as an industry, we're really only at the starting gates. With these incredibly well-known, well-loved brands which have such strong consumer equity, if we can't develop meaningful new businesses around our core products, then shame on us. But all that I've said so far is really just the prelude, the overture, if you like, to the main piece. There's no doubt that consumer habits are changing, and for us to stay relevant in their lives, we have to be where they are and when they're there and in the format that they want, and the speed at which we make that change has to be accelerated. So at Hearst, we look at digital with 3 priorities. We're building large-scale free web presences. We're creating and publishing curated linear products for the tablets, and we're experimenting and testing in e-commerce. And for all of this, we look at mobile as our primary route to the consumer. Now, over the years at conferences like this, we've seen hundreds of these kind of diagrams with the magazine at the center and a brand onion or wagon wheel with different things spinning around it. So that's nothing new, but today's world is changed. Because of the devices that she owns and the search and social tools that are available to her, we need to think of the consumer at the center of her own media world. More often than not, she decides what she wants to look at or read about, not us, not our editors. And she's got a lot of providers. She's got a huge choice of providers, particularly in the English language. And our challenge, therefore, is to be everywhere that she is at the time that she wants to be there. And then we have to have a clear and distinct point of view to make sure she comes back to us, not one of the other providers. We also know that the digital environment has destroyed barriers between what were traditionally different sectors, between newspapers and magazines, between retail and media, between TV and pretty much everything. And for us to compete, we have to be as good as the very best in each category, in each market. To be relevant, we have to have the mentality and the speed of a newsroom with new content on our sites first thing in the morning and last thing at night. We have to tell our stories in pictures, which is actually a core skill of ours, and in video, which is a skill that we're learning. I'm not going to show a video. We have to invite the consumer to be an equal partner in the creation of content. And as we know from just looking at YouTube or Instagram, how good they are at it. And it has to be an equal partnership between the professional content makers and the users. And we have to present our content on the devices that she chooses to use in a format that makes sense for that device. No more pinching and zooming. The measurability of the web means that we can assess in real time using tools like Chartbeat how good our stories are in engaging consumers. It's kind of scary for journalists. And in fact, collecting, analyzing, and using data has to become a core skill in our organizations to help us decide what content to produce, which journalists are best at engaging the audience, have those best skills, to help us enhance the traffic that we bring to the sites, and then enhance the value of that traffic when we present it to advertisers. And we need to find ways to add value to our advertisers' messages through the way they're placed, the way they're created, and the context they're placed in. You know, native advertising is just another word for advertorial, and we've been doing that forever. So look, the free web should be our marketplace. There's no reason why, with all of the advantages that we have, we shouldn't win in the content space online, but only if we're prepared to make the commitments in resources, time, money, to compete with the pure plays who are already there and have none of the legacy issues. In parallel to our free web products, we're creating and publishing, like all of you, linear created products for distribution on tablets and smartphones. In the US, we've done pretty well. I mean, we're selling around 1 million copies of digital magazines a month. That's incremental, not packaged with subscriptions. These are incrementally, separately paid magazines. And we set a target of 3 million copies by the end of 2015. Now, that sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but just to put it in context, we sell around 28 million print magazines every month in the US, so still less than 5%. We're working with all the major retailers, the ones here, this is a slightly old presentation, plus a lot of local retailers who are present here, and we're continually testing different product formats to make the consumer experience as good as it can be. And frankly, I don't think we've cracked it yet. And just like in the print world, we've found that an investment in marketing is crucial. You can't expect to put your magazines in these retail stores and then not spend money to support them, like you wouldn't expect to do when launching a magazine on newsstands. And our products have to be elegantly and appropriately designed for the screen sizes of different devices. So, the arrival of tablets, no question, opened up an amazing market for us as publishers. But it did exactly the same for games makers, for television companies, for retailers. And we've got to make sure that the products that we put on those tablets are as good as the products that those other competitors for the consumer's time put up there. I don't think we're there yet, but if we can get it right, it's going to be a fantastic new channel. And finally, a word or two about e-commerce. I know it seems obvious that having the more direct link with our consumer that digital channels gives us should lead neatly and easily to an e-commerce business. But I think we need to be clear about the size of the competitors that we're up against. They're huge companies with an ability and willingness to invest very heavily in building their marketplaces. And so I think all publishers have to assess to what extent they want to make that investment in what is a low-margin business. Retailing is a low-margin business and a terrible business for cash generation. That said, at Hearst Fujingaho in Japan, we've built a large, full-service fashion e-commerce business, which after 3 years is now contributing very significantly to the revenues in our Japanese business and is profitable. In the USA, working originally exclusively with Saks Fifth Avenue, We've developed, and you've seen this earlier, a product which allows the readers to buy the merchandise they see in the magazine directly off the page without giving us the risk of inventory. And in China, we've developed this further by building a platform on which multiple retailers can sell their merchandise while the consumer has a single checkout and feels they're buying from ELLE. So, in conclusion on e-commerce, we do see, listen, we've been connecting retailers and manufacturers to our audience for years. It's called advertising. But we do expect, if we're careful and judicious and depending upon your appetite for risk, there's an opportunity to enhance your revenues through e-commerce. And so to finish, listen, no question the market's tough. Doing the same things as we've done in the past isn't going to help. We need to be faster, we need to be more efficient, and we need to accelerate our digital transformation. At the same time, this time of the year is fantastic. We've just published our September and October issues of our major women's fashion and beauty magazines. We've launched 3 major new editions of incredibly famous global brands. Many of our magazines in September and October have had record pagination, and I'm sure yours have too, and record revenues. So we feel very happy that we're still in the magazine business. Thank you very much.